Ego death, the internet's favorite new buzzword and the peak of modern spirituality, is often described as the end of thought, identity, and suffering. But what if I told you that none of these things actually change? The ego remains, experience continues to unfold, and a narrator still explaining it all. And yet, suffering can be dramatically reduced without the experience changing at all. To show what actually changes, I've developed a 3-layer model of experience. Layer 1. Phenomenological experience. This is the layer in which emotions, sensations, and raw mental activity occur. This is the core of all living beings. This is the experience of being alive. The body, the emotion, the raw ache of experience, it all lives here. Examples of this experience include chest pains, the experience of emotion, all of the senses, the grass between your toes, the taste of ice cream. This is the user's subjective experience of reality before egoic identification or interpretation. Layer 2. Interpretation of experience. This is where the ego operates. It explains experience, it does not generate it. Anything that you think you are lives here. This is the narrator of experience, the illusion of self. Layer 1 is where the experience of having a chest pain arises. Layer 2 is the interpretation of that experience. Layer 1 is the experience. Layer 2 is, oh my god, I'm having a heart attack, I'm about to die. I want to be clear here, this isn't something I've moved beyond. I experience this constantly. Sensations arise, and almost immediately a story appears to explain it. Fear, certainty, urgency. I gotta go to a hospital. I'm dying. I'm dying. The point isn't that the story is foolish, though it may sound it. The point is that the story is secondary to experience. But this is where things get confusing. Even when you understand that the story is secondary, the story still happens. The ego continues to operate, and experience continues to unfold. So what actually changes? Layer 3, relationship to experience. What changes isn't the experience, and it isn't the ego. What changes is the relationship to both. Layer 3 is where the ego folds back onto itself. This is the difference between identification versus observation. This is the metacognition of the ego. Identification is I am this emotion. Observation is this emotion is happening inside me. It's at this point that a common pitfall occurs. Identification shifts from stories and experiences to identifying with a complete observer state. The rejection of interpretation and identification occurs only conceptually, though in practice it persists through the story of being only the observer. Lack of narration and identification does not imply a lack of stitching. Experience is still being integrated into memory and coherence even when no voice is speaking. Becoming aware of your eyes does not let you see without them. You can become aware of vision as a process, but you still see through said process. This is ego awareness, not transcendence. This is where it's important to be precise. The ego is a function of the body. Similarly, bending your fingers is a function. You cannot transcend the ego, though it may feel that way. Silence does not mean absence. As long as experience is occurring, the ego is just as active as breath in the body. Even this realization right now is occurring within the function of the ego. Nothing has changed. What does change is identification. I know, confusing. Unexamined identification with interpretation is what produces suffering. The experience itself doesn't need to change. When identification softens, suffering softens as well. The experience hasn't changed, the relationship to experience has. There is no longer an identification with the story of suffering. This is the critical distinction. Experience continues. Identification with the story doesn't have to. The ego doesn't disappear and interpretation does not cease. What becomes optional is identification with the stories the ego generates. Experiences can be described directly. Interpretation must remain provisional. The ego meets this bar. It has direct phenomenological presence and observable effects. What becomes optional is not the experience, but the stories we mistake for reality. This is usually where people expect peace or silence or some permanent state. But that expectation is still part of the same mechanism. Permanence is a man-made concept. Nothing lasts forever. So what now? Life. The same life, just seen more clearly. The ability to see through the stories for what they are, stories. The ego is not your enemy. The ego is not your friend. It simply is. The ego is a function of the body like your fingers or breath. And as long as you're breathing, the ego is too. Nothing has been removed, nothing needs to be. And in that sense, this really is just the beginning.